Welcome, my friends. In this video, I'm going to be talking about some of the basics of Google Sheets. First of all, if you'd like to follow along with this tutorial, you can go to the description of this video and you can open this Google Sheets file, and you will have to make a copy. So if you have opened this file, you can go to File, and then you can make a copy and save that to your Google Drive, and then you should be able to make edits to this document if you want to kind of follow along as I'm going through this video. So first of all, what is Google Sheets? So Google Sheets is a spreadsheet application similar to Microsoft Excel, but Google Sheets has some advantages over Microsoft Excel. So one advantage is that Google Sheets is an online application that's going to function very similarly on different types of computers. So it doesn't matter if you have a Microsoft computer or a Mac computer or something else, it's going to function very similarly, and that cannot be said about Microsoft Excel. So Microsoft Excel functions a little bit differently depending on what kind of a device you have. Secondly, Google Sheets is an online application, so it kind of saves as you go. So that's another advantage. You don't have to kind of worry about constantly saving this. And it's really easy to access your device, your files on different devices. So if I've got this computer right here, and then maybe I have an iPad or another computer at work or something, I can easily access this file because it's all kind of saved online. And additionally, if you want to kind of share these files with other people, and maybe you have several people working on the same file, Google Sheets is a lot better for that than Microsoft Excel, because multiple people can be logged into the same file at the same time, and you can kind of see the edits in real time. Okay, so that's a number of the advantages of Google Sheets over Excel. I do personally still prefer Excel over Google Sheets, but some of those advantages do make Google Sheets a lot more, desirable. The functionality of Excel, I'm a little bit more used to that. I kind of grew up using Excel, so I'm a little more used to that. So I'll be kind of differentiating, maybe some of the things that are slightly different in Excel. But in general, they are very similar programs. So here I have a spreadsheet related to sales, a number of employees here. We have the first and last name of the employees. We have their sales in January, their sales in February, and the region that they are from. The first thing I want to mention is if you want to kind of change the zoom of this file here, if you hold down Control and press the plus sign, you can zoom in, or Control and the minus sign, you will zoom out. Or if you're on a Mac computer, you might have to use the Command key. So if you kind of want to adjust that, you should be able to do that. Secondly, I want to talk about just in general here that we have numbers here for our rows, and we have letters here for our columns, and that is the same in Microsoft Excel as well. And the intersection of a row and a column is what we call a cell. So for example, this very first cell here is what we call the cell name of A1. So in A1, I have the text of first name, which shows up right here, and it also shows up here in the formula bar. So if I want to modify this, I could modify it up here, or I could modify it within the cell here by changing it. Let's say that we would like to change, maybe we want to change this sales in January cell, right? So this is cell C1. So if I was to just click on cell C1 here, and if I was to start typing, it's actually going to overwrite the entire contents of that cell. But maybe I just wanted to edit the cell. Maybe I didn't want to overwrite the entire thing. So if you realize that you made that mistake, you can just press the escape key and you'll be back where you started. So how can you actually edit the contents of the cell without deleting it? Well, there are a couple ways to do that. One way would be to double click on the cell. If you've double clicked on the cell, now you are inside the cell rather than simply selecting the cell, right? If I just click on the cell, I've selected the cell, and then any typing will overwrite it. If I double click, I will be inside the cell, indicated by this blinking kind of cursor here. And now when I type anything, it will just edit the cell rather than overwrite the whole thing. So maybe I want to say change Jan to January. So I can type in January, and I can press Enter, and then that will have changed the cell. Let's say I want to do the same thing for February. Let me show you one other way to do this. In Google Sheets, this does not work for Excel, but in Google Sheets, if you just press Enter, you will also be inside the cell. So I can press Enter or double click, and then I can either type right here, or if I'd like to, I can type up here in what we call the formula bar. So I'm going to type up here this time and press Enter, and then that will change the contents of that cell as well. Now you may notice here, since I've modified those cells, it's somewhat getting cut off here, so I can't see the entire text of February. You notice it's still here in the formula bar, but I can't see the whole thing here. In January is, maybe just very slightly cut off there. So what you can do is you can modify the size of a column a column or row by going in between two columns, and then your cursor will kind of change into this kind of two-sided arrow here, and we can left click and drag to increase the size of that cell. You can also do the same thing for rows, right? I can increase the size of rows, but we don't really want to do that right now. So another way you can do that, let me do this for February here, is instead of clicking and dragging, you can just double click. And if you just double click, it's going to resize that column to what it thinks is an appropriate size to fit the text that you have. Okay, so two different ways. One, you can click and drag, or you can just double click. And if you double click, it will size that to an appropriate size. Now, sometimes you might want to reformat some of the cells, the contents of the cells, because maybe they contain a certain type of text, like maybe a date or a type of number. In this case, we have sales numbers here, which are, these really should be displaying as dollars. So if I want to display these as dollars, what I can do is I can highlight all of the numbers. So let's click on the first one and drag down and highlight all the numbers here. And I'd like these to be displayed in dollars and cents. So if I click on the dollar here, it's going to format that as currency, and now they are formatted as dollars and cents. But since all of these numbers don't really contain any cents, they're all rounded to the nearest dollar, maybe I don't care about the cents after the decimal point there. So I can click on the decrease decimal place twice, and then I will have these rounded to the nearest dollar. Now, if you'd like to add onto your table, you can insert columns or rows for that matter. So in this case, I'm going to insert a column to the left of first name. So to insert that column, I'm going to click on column A. Specifically, I'm going to right click. I'm going to right click on column A. And then I have this option here to either insert a column to the left or to the right. Let's say I want to insert one column to the left. I can also delete the column, clear the column. I have a couple other options. Hide the column if you don't want to see it for now. But right now, I'm just going to insert one column to the left. And I'm going to title this column Employee Number. And once again, I notice that this cell is kind of cut off, so I'm going to double click between A and B to increase the size of that cell. Now in the employee number column, I want to have a number that indicates the employee number. And let's just kind of make this simple here. Let's just say the very first person is employee number 1, the second person is employee number 2, and we want to continue this pattern for all of the employees here. Now I could type in that employee number for every single employee, but that would be very tedious, especially if I had hundreds or maybe even thousands of different employees here. So instead of typing in the number for every employee, I'm just going to type in the first two. I'm going to highlight those first two numbers. And then you'll notice here I have a kind of like a dot here in the bottom right. We call that the fill handle. And if I hover over that, you'll see that my cursor kind of changes to this kind of like plus sign type thing. And so what I can do is I can click that, left click that, and drag down to the bottom. And that will continue that pattern down for the other cell. So Google Sheets here has recognized that I just want to increment by 1, 2, 3, all the way through 20. And so it's kind of continue that pattern all the way down. Let me show you one other way you could do that. Instead of clicking and dragging, you can instead just double click on that. If you just double click on that, it will assume you want to continue that pattern all the way down to the end of the table. Okay, and this can notice other patterns as well. So let's say I don't just have 1 and 2, maybe I have 2 and 4, right? Then it's going to notice that I am counting by 2s, and it's going to do 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, or by 10s or 20s or whatever, right? Or it'll also do this with letters. It doesn't work quite as well with letters, but it can kind of try to some degree. So if you do A, B, C, it's not actually going to do D, E, F, G, etc. It's actually going to repeat the pattern of, it's going to repeat the pattern of A, B, C all over again. I believe you can also do something like this if you had, I could do employee 1, and I could have employee 2, and I could drag that down, and it is going to recognize that I want to have something like that. So that can save you a lot of time. Rather than typing all that in, you can kind of complete the pattern. So let's revert this back to our 1s and 2s like we had, or 1, 2, all the way through 20 like we had initially. Let's add another column here to the right of column E. So I'm going to add another column. I'm going to right click on column E, and I'm going to insert one column to the right. In this column, I want to title Sales Improvement. And in this column, I want it to display how much larger this employee's sales is in February compared to January. So for example, the very first employee here has a sales in February of 8,600 and January sales of 8,400. So I would like this cell to have a 200 to indicate the $200 improvement from January to February. And I could do this for the next person would actually have a sales improvement of 250. But as you're going to see, in Google Sheets, you don't want to manually do these calculations yourself. you're going to want to let Google Sheets do all that work for you. So instead of doing this, I'm going to use an Excel formula in order to do that calculation for us. So in Excel, if you want to use either a pre-built function, which we'll talk about later, or a formula where you're basically kind of adding or subtracting or multiplying, some kind of basically using Excel as a calculator, you're going to start that by typing an equal to sign. So if you start an equal to sign, that tells Excel that whatever comes after that equal to sign is going to be some kind of calculation or formula, right? And you can do this in a few different ways. One way is you can literally type in numerical formulas or calculations in here, and it will do it for you. So if you type in 2 plus 2, it is just going to give you what 2 plus 2 is equal to. Or I can type in equals 8 minus 3, or 8 times 3 maybe, and I get 24. Or whatever you want. Maybe I want to type in equals 2 to the third power. So you can do formulas like that. But if you don't type the equal to sign, it will not work. So if I type in 2 times 2, it's just going to literally say 2 times 2 in my cell there. So I have to type in the equal to sign first. Now in this case, I don't want to type in the values. I want to reference other cells in here in order to complete this kind of formula. So I want to reference my 8,600 here. So I'm going to click on 8,600, and I want to subtract minus the sales in January, 8,400. So it's going to kind of highlight those so you can see the colors and how those match up. So I have cell E2, the 8,600, minus the cell D2, which is the 8,400. If I press enter, it is going to do that calculation for us, give us the 200. Now additionally, it's going to sometimes suggest an autofill. It's going to say, well, maybe you want to do a similar type of calculation for all the other cells. And so if I press the checkbox here, it's going to do the same formula for the remaining values there. Now I want to show you how to do this without using the the automatic check mark box there, because sometimes that won't show up, or sometimes maybe you missed it and you still want to go ahead and be able to copy that formula down. So what if I want to copy this this similar formula down to the other cells? So instead of doing that same formula for every single one of these, what if we want to do this all at once? Well, just like before, you can just use the fill handle. So you can either double click here, or you can click and drag down. So I can click and drag down to however many cells I want, or if I want to do all the way down to the end, I can just double click on that, and that will complete the formula for the remaining cells. And if you really want to see what it's doing here, if you double click on the cell, you'll be inside the cell and you can kind of see what the reference is. So the first cell was E2 minus D2. The second cell, if I double click on that, is E3 minus D3. Or the fourth one here, the fourth row, I guess, is now going to be E4 minus D4, etc. Right? So all Google Sheets has done is it's just taken where you started here, and since we're dragging down, every value is going to increment by 1. So instead of E2, D2, now it's going to be E3, D3, etc., right? Now, there's a word for this type of reference. So when you're referencing cells and you want those cells to change as you're dragging down a formula. So if I'm referencing, these numbers, and I want those to change for each of my formulas, right? I want to drag this. I want when I drag this down for those numbers to shift as well. That is what we call a relative reference. A very important term for you to know with relation to spreadsheets. A relative reference is something that you've referenced in a formula that you're going to drag down, where you want those values to change, or you want those values to modify as you kind of drag down that formula. So we would call the cells that we reference here, we would call those relative references. Now we differentiate that between what is called an absolute reference. An absolute reference would be something that you do not want to change, right? So maybe I'm referencing some cell, and maybe I want to drag down a formula, but I want that initial cell that I'm referencing not to change anywhere ever, right? So we'll have an example of that a little bit later, but I just want to give you a preview of that before we actually get to it. Now, last thing I'm noticing here, maybe we want to increase the size of this column, so let's double click in between. Okay, next let's go ahead and kind of summarize some of this information by going to a cell a little bit over here to the right. So I'm just arrowing over here to the right. And I'm going to go in cell J3, and I'm going to type in January summary. So I'm going to summarize some of the information specifically for January. So January summary. So I'm going to find the total sales. I'm going to find the maximum sales, like the salesperson who's got the most sales. And I'm also going to find the average sales, right? And since this January sales is kind of like a kind of like a title for this, I'm actually going to merge this across these two cells. So if you click on cell J3 here and then you drag this over to cell K3, you'll have highlighted both of those cells. And then you can go up here and you can merge those cells. So if I click on merge the cells, now that has become one cell. In addition to that, I can go ahead and I can center those cells. So I think I might need to press the more here, and then I can do the horizontal align, and I can center those cells. Right? Now, if you're in Excel, it'll actually do both of those things at once. There's an option for merge and center, but if you're in Google Sheets, then it actually is only merging, but is not centering. So you're gonna have to do the centering separately. Okay, so now we can calculate a couple of things here, and we're going to calculate these using some pre-built functions in Google Sheets. So the pre-built functions are going to be accessed by typing equal to, and then the name of the function. Let me get out of this first. So the name of the function we want to do for the total sales is the sum function. So I'm going to type in SUM, and you'll see here that we have a bunch of different options here. We're going to use the very first one. So you can either click on sum, or if you just click on, instead of clicking on it, if you just typed a open parentheses here, that would open it as well. So typically, I usually know the name of the functions I'm going to use. I usually just type in SUM, open parentheses, and that's going to start my function here. And what do I want to sum? Well, I want to sum the January sales. So I'm going to click on the very first sale in January, which is the 8,400, and I want to sum all the sales in January. So I need to click and drag this down to the end. And that will highlight all the sales in January. And if I press enter, it is going to have calculated these sales in January, which end up being 124,000. Now it's going to suggest an autofill, but the autofill it's doing is not going to actually be correct because we don't want totals for the other one. So we're going to press the X here for the reject suggestion. Now before I move on here, I want to show, actually maybe I'll show it to you in the next one. So that's our total sales. If we add up all the sales, let's find the max sales. So we can use the max function, MAX, open parentheses. And here, instead of clicking and then dragging down, there's a kind of a shortcut here. If you hold down the Control and the Shift buttons at the same time, I'm holding down both Control and Shift, and then pressing the down arrow, that will highlight the entire list. So kind of a shortcut here, instead of just dragging down. If I just click the very first one, I hold down Control and Shift, and then I press the down arrow, it will do all of them, right? If I hold down only Shift and I press the down arrow, it'll do like one at a time. But if you hold down Control and Shift at the same time, it'll go down to the bottom of the list. So kind of just a nice shortcut to know. I can close my parentheses here, press enter, and I've got the maximum sales of 10,000, which you can see that number was right here. So it kind of picked out that number. I also want to know the average sales, so I'm going to type in equals average. I'm going to click on the very first one. I'm going to hold down Control and Shift. I'm going to press the down arrow, and I'm going to be to the bottom of that list. I'm going to close parentheses, press enter, and I have the average sales, which turned out to be $6,200. Okay, so from here, maybe you want to just make this a little bit nicer. I'm going to bold this, so if I hold down Control and press B, that will have bolded the January summary. I can also hold down Control and press U, and that will have underline that as well. Just kind of makes it a little bit nicer and neater there. You might have to do Command B or Command U on a Mac computer. All right, let's add on one more column to our table. So to the right of region, let's add another column, which is titled Best Seller. Right? So in the Best Seller column, we're going to determine just for January, so we're only going to focus on January, whether or not an employee is a best seller. So in order to determine if someone is a best seller, we kind of have to have a threshold, like how much in sales does someone have to have in order to be a best seller. And so we're going to create that over here. We're going to have a best seller threshold. And I am going to increase the size of this column to fit that text. And let's say our bestseller threshold is $7,000. So what that means is we're going to classify someone as a bestseller if their sales is $7,000 or greater, right? Or I guess maybe if it's just greater than 7,000. They got to be bigger than 7,000. And if they are bigger than 7,000, they are going to be classified as a bestseller. Okay, and to do this, we're going to use an if function. Okay, so we're going to go in here and we're going to type in equal to, and then we're going to type in if, open parenthesis, and then we're going to have three things in here. It looks like it's not showing up the way that I want it to here. Equal to if. Maybe I need to click on this. I don't know why it's doing yeah, there we go. If I press on the question mark, then it's going to give me kind of a formula help here. So this is a little bit different than the other formulas or functions we've used in that it actually takes in 3 separate arguments into this function. So what I mean by that is there are 3 different things you have to type into an if function. So what the if function is going to do is it's first going to take in a logical expression. And for us, that logical expression is going to be if the sales in January are bigger than the threshold, right? So if the sales in January are bigger than the threshold, well, if that's true, that's going to be our second argument. If that's true, we're going to output yes. And if that is false, we are going to output no, right? So the basic way that the if function works is check a condition, whether or not this is bigger than this in this case. If it's true, you're going to output one value. If it's false, you're going to output a different value. Let me get out of this right here so I can type in here. The first thing I need is the condition. So the condition is whether or not the sales in January are greater than the bestseller threshold. And here is the bestseller threshold. So I'm going to click on the bestseller threshold. And if I want to get to the second argument of this, I can press the comma. And once I press the comma, I'm on the second one. If I press the question mark, if you're a little stuck here, you'll see here we are on the value if true. This kind of gets in the way, so I don't really want it. But once you press the comma, you've moved on to the next kind of argument. So value of true. So this is asking me, what do I want this cell to display if the value is true? Well, if it's true, if the sales in January are greater than the threshold, I want this to display yes. And if you're going to display text here, you're going to have to include that in quotes. So I'm going to do quotes, double quotes here, yes. And then I'm going to do another comma, and then if I click here, you'll see that I'm on the value if false now. So if it's true, if the value is greater than the bestseller threshold, then I'm going to say yes. If it is not greater than, then I'm going to say no, they're not a bestseller. So I'm going to put that in quotes as well. Note that you need quotes for numerical values, but you do not need quotes if they were, you need quotes for text values, but you do not need quotes for numerical values. So if I was to type like, I wanted to display a 10 or something, right? Then I would not need to have the 10 in quotes here. Let's go to the end of this, and then let's close the parentheses, press enter, and you will see that this first person, Anderson here, Sydney Anderson, is a bestseller. How do we know? Well, because the sales in January are bigger than the bestseller threshold, right? 8,400 is indeed bigger than $7,000, right? Now, I want to remind you of something that I mentioned earlier, which is the difference between relative and absolute references. So if we look at the two numbers that we've referenced in this cell, we have the D2, which is 8,400, and we have the K7, which is the $7,000. Now, we would like the 8,400 to be a relative reference. By that when we drag this formula down, we want that to reference the other cells as we drag it down. So we want this to change to 8,700, 6,500 for each of the values as we go down, right? So that's what we would call a relative reference. We would like the D2 to be a relative reference. On the other hand, the K7, we would like that to be an absolute reference, meaning that once I start to drag this formula down, I do not want this 7,000 to change. So in order to not make that 7,000 change, you have to do something special to that value, okay? So you're going to go right after the K7 here, and if you press F4 on your keyboard, you may have to press the function key and then F4 on some computers, or you can manually type in the $signs if none of that works for you. But for me, I can just press F4. That will create that into what we call an absolute reference. And so what that's going to do is, if I press enter, and then I can do the autofill here, is you'll notice here that for every single value, this number is getting dragged down. The D4, D5, D6, but this K7 is not changing, right? No matter which one I select here, the K7 is not changing. Let me show you how this would look if I did not use the absolute reference. So if I did this K7 without the $signs, if I did this as a relative reference, and I drag this down, first of all, it looks like Google Sheets is smart here. It's recognizing that maybe I did not do this wrong, did not do this right, but I'm going to reject their suggestion, and it's actually going to tell me like everyone's a bestseller. And what you're seeing here is if I double click on any of these other cells, you can see it's no longer referencing K7. So it's dragged down to further cells here. So it's treating that as a relative reference, but we don't want that. We want that 7,000 to stay the same. So we're going to treat that as an absolute reference. We're going to click after the K7. We're going to press F4 and enter, and then we're going to drag that down. Now, if your keyboard requires you to press like a function key before F4, there is a way to change that. You might want to look that up for your specific keyboard. I had to change it on I have an HP laptop. I had to change that because I just got so confused, or not confused, I got irritated of always having to press the function key and then F4. So there is a way to enable it so the default when you press F4 is actually F4 rather than, maybe like for me, it's I'm not sure what it is. It's some kind of other function, but I want F4 to actually be F4. So you might be able to change that on your keyboard if that's something you're going to be interested in doing. If you're using a lot of Google Sheets, then it might be something good for you to do. Now, what is always important to do is to make sure after you've finished a function that it is doing it correctly. So you want to check a couple of these at random. So, okay, this person says not a bestseller. Well, that makes sense because his sales are not greater than 7,000. Or this person is a bestseller. Oh, that makes sense because their sales is greater than 8,500. So I've checked a couple of these. I'm confident that this is working correctly. Now, a cool thing you can do here once you've kind of programmed your sheet is if you start changing some things, that will actually change any of the things that have formulas in them. So what I mean by that is, let's say we want to change the bestseller threshold. So maybe it's not 7,000 anymore. Maybe that's too low. I want to change it to 8,000. And when I press enter after typing in 8,000, you will see that some of these values have actually changed. So this person who was a bestseller before with 7,850 is now no longer a bestseller. So if I kind of toggle this back and forth, you can see some of those values are changing. Looks like just two of them that we can see here are changing, right? Or if I change this to like 5,000, then we have quite a bit more bestsellers. If I change this to 10,000, then actually no one ends up being a bestseller, right? I'm going to revert this back to 7,000. Now, the next thing I'd like to do is count how many bestsellers that I have. So I have all the bestsellers here, and I could manually count them. Yeah, I go 1, 2, 3, 4. But instead of doing that, especially if I had a really large data set, I'm going to use Google Sheets here to do that for me. So I'm going to go into this cell here, and I'm going to type in number of bestsellers. And then I'm going to use the COUNTIF function to count that. So the COUNTIF function, COUNTIF. And then if I click on the question mark here, you'll be able to see what the inputs are here. You have to have a range and then also a criteria. So basically, you're going to highlight a bunch of information, and it's only going to count that value if it meets some certain criteria. So in this case, we want to count the bestsellers. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to hold down Control and Shift and press the down arrow to get to the bottom of that list. But I don't want to count all of these. I only want to count these if so if I press the comma, I'm on the criteria. I only want to count these if they say yes. So I'm going to do quotations yes. I got to use quotations there because yes is text. So now if I press enter, close parentheses and enter, it's going to count how many bestsellers I have. Apparently there are 10 bestsellers in my bestseller column, right? So I can quickly count how many bestsellers that I have. Okay, one of the last things I want to show you here is we can kind of convert our entire table here into basically a data table or a filtered table here. So the way we can do that is if you click anywhere inside the table, I'm going to click on A1 here, and if I go into data, and then I can go ahead and create a filter. And that's going to have created a filter on all of these values. Now, if you're in Excel, then you might want to do Insert Data Table. You have an option for Insert Data Table, which basically does somewhat of a similar thing here. But here we're going to be just inserting a filter. Okay, and what that filter allows us to do is we get to sort any of these values as well as filter out certain values that we do not want. So for example, let's say I got these regions over here. Maybe I want to filter out the region. So I can click the filter, and maybe I only want to consider the South region. So I can uncheck the boxes for anything but South. I can press OK, and now all I've got left is the ones for the South region, right? Or if I click here again, I want South and East or whatever, right? Or I can go back to select all, and that will kind of change it, right? So filtering is one thing, but what I think is even more valuable here is the sort feature. So once you've put the filter here, you can sort these in any way that you want to. So if I want to sort it by last name, I can sort it from A to Z by last name, and now I've got them sorted by last name. Or if I want to sort it by, sales improvement, I can sort these by sales improvement as well. Let's say that I want to sort the sales in January, and I want to figure out, who was getting the most sales in January. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sort this from Z to A, actually, Z to A. So if you do Z to A here, what that means in terms of numerical values is you're going to get the higher numbers first. The Z is kind of considering like bigger numbers, right? Or if I did A to Z, I'm going to get the smaller numbers first, right? So Z to A is going to give me the bigger numbers first here. So now I can easily see Drew Walker had the biggest sales in January. Also had a lot of sales in February. Cameron Taylor is the second one. Or I could switch this around here, and I could see that Quinn Hall actually is, the lowest salesperson. Maybe this person, just started like mid through January or something. It looks like he also wasn't doing great in February either. Maybe he's part-time, who knows, right? But this can give you, easily allow you to kind of sort your data in whichever way you want. I'm going to change this back to sorting so we have the biggest numbers first. Okay, so last thing here is maybe just kind of spruce this up a little bit, make this a little bit nicer here. So let's, I noticed now that I've added the filters, I still can't quite read everything. Some of them are getting cut off. So I could double click between any of these columns, but another option is to highlight all the columns. So I'm going to click on column H. I'm going to hold down the Shift and I'm going to click on A. That will have highlighted all the columns. I can additionally just hold down or just drag through them, but I like to use the Shift command here. So if I hold down Shift, I can click on the other one and that will highlight all of those. And now if I double click in between any of them, doesn't matter which one I do, that will increase the size of every single column here. Now in addition to that, maybe I want to create a border here. So if I click on the borders option and click on the all borders, then I've created a table that has borders. It looks a little bit nicer. It looks like I actually highlighted maybe more than I wanted to. Let me go back. Actually, I don't really want to highlight the entire columns here. I probably just want to highlight the entire table. So I'm going to hold down Shift and click there, right? Because otherwise I got borders all the way down here. I don't really want that. So I'm going to go here and then insert the borders. Maybe I want to center this as well. So if I click on this horizontal line and center, now I've centered everything. Maybe I want to do something kind of similar to the values over here. So maybe I want to create a border around these, and maybe I want to center these as well. So they can just kind of spruce it up a little bit, make it look a little bit nicer. All right, I think that is just about all that I wanted to talk about related to this kind of a introduction assignment here. I've got another one for you to try here in the Students tab. So if you download this file, there's one for students. And if you look at the Word document, then I kind of guide you through some steps to take on your own going through students, not as detailed steps as I have here in the video. But if you would like to try another similar example, you can try that out for the Students tab right here. But that's all I have for you, so thanks for watching, and hope that this was useful.